This is Grog Talk. We're talking to Greg Kline from Red, Maryland about the riots in Baltimore, getting good, fresh information from the ground to contradict all the other crazy stuff we've been hearing about. So we've obviously got city politics. We've got, police abuse possibly. We've got, the media nonsense that always goes on that clouds the reality. At the end of the day, a riot started, and so we should probably try to clear up some other stuff. There's been reports of people from outside coming in to irritate tensions and to make things worse. Of course, Al Sharpton showed up, as you said, which is never a good thing.
No.
What's the reality there?
Well, the reality is there were a lot of reports, and initially on Saturday, the reporting locally, because, of course, that on Saturday night, the national media was more worried about the correspondence dinner than they were about the riots going on 40 miles up the road. But the reporting was there were a lot of outside agitators. The reality is, when you look at the police arrest records, the vast majority of the people involved in these were Baltimoreans. There may be people outside agitating, but it's not a big factor. This is homegrown. And I think to some extent that's why you've seen it die down so quickly once the police, and really once the governor of our state stepped in and got the thing under control, that we haven't seen the widespread unrest that we saw before. Because this was homegrown, and you had an inadequate police response, a really failed police response. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the video. I mean, Monday afternoon, where you were seeing police officers carried away injured and being pelted with rocks. I mean, it's just extraordinary that the city of Baltimore simply lost control of a big chunk of that city. And as you guys pointed out, watched it burn literally until finally. And this is an important point that I do want to get to, if you guys will let me.
Sure.
We have a Republican governor here who just got elected in November, and he's done such a fantastic job getting this thing under control, and he's kind of getting some national profile for it. But the Democrats here, and I know Al Sharpton went after him particularly, this Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake, who we've been a critic of for a long time at Red, Maryland, is just not used to getting negative press, and she's been really trying to get out from under all the criticism from the way the city handled this. In Maryland, and I don't know if New Hampshire is the same way or not, in order for the governor to bring in the National Guard, one of two things has to happen. Either there has to be a request from a locality, a local jurisdiction, for an emergency declaration, which is what happened here, or the governor would have to unilaterally declare martial law, which hasn't happened here in a long time. The governor was anticipating that emergency declaration was going to be brought by the mayor, but she kept putting it off. The governor, as the governor mentioned on Monday night, the usual response time for the National Guard to get activated is 8 hours. He was planning ahead, and that reaction time was much, much shorter. In fact, he was ready to go once he got asked to come in. And when the mayor finally called and asked for help, he signed an executive order within 30 seconds of that phone call, and the trucks were on the road immediately. There have been some on our side who've been kind of critical of why he didn't unilaterally just go in himself. I think it's pretty obvious from the optics that you've already seen that would have been a mistake.
Harry
but more
Truman.
Importantly, and this is important to remember for people when they talk, when the mayor of Baltimore asked for an emergency declaration, she did two things that are critical to remember. And I think they explain why she delayed. Number one, incumbent in that request was the mayor of Baltimore had to acknowledge that the mayor and the city of Baltimore, who prior to Monday had state police and outside jurisdictions supporting them, but they still had to admit that their resources were inadequate to deal with the emergency, that they in the city could not handle the emergency. Yeah. So by requesting state aid, they admitted that, number one. And number two, they had to turn over control to the state of Maryland. And in this case, it would have been the state police who would have come in and taken over there, along with the support of other jurisdictions. Yeah. So, while the mayor is trying to, and Commissioner Batts in the city have continued to have press conferences and act like they're running the show, the reality is they admitted failure on Monday, called for state aid, and the state stepped in. And since that time, you haven't seen the unrest that you saw. You haven't seen any rioting. You haven't seen that kind of unrest because the state has been running the show. And the governor, who's been trying very hard not to make this a political issue or not to try to point fingers, even though he's been getting a lot of criticism from those in the city who are very defensive right now, including Al Sharpton coming into their defense, has done a really masterful job not only managing the situation and dealing with the emergency, but going out to the city and meeting with people and working in the community to try to build some, long-term improvements to what's going on here. And he's not been making it a political issue the way that the Democrats have. And sometimes, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. But I think it's important for people, especially outside of Maryland, to understand that, we have a Republican grown-up who's governor of the state. And the difference between Democrats and Republicans in Maryland was on clear display between Monday and the rest of the week.
Greg, quick question. Just to answer your question, our governor, while being the weakest in the nation, can call out the National Guard at his or her whim to deal with anything. We're a much smaller state. Towns and cities are only political subdivisions of the state, so the state has that ability to do what they want when they want, so that's not a problem. But as you're talking about Governor Hogan there, has he gotten pretty good kudos for the way that he's handled it? I know he's tried to be more in the background from looking from up here down to there. Are people seeing that dichotomy of quiet but effective versus loud and ineffective at all?
Because he not only was he prepared, but he also basically moved a mobile headquarters into town and kept that low-key as well.
Yeah, well, he's had his press conferences. I think the media has tended... I don't think he's gotten the credit he deserves, which is one of the reasons I wanted to point it out. I think part of that is, as he said publicly, I'm not here to point fingers or, cast blame. I'm here to solve the problem. But part of it is, too, and having said that, he pointed out on his press conference on Monday night that exactly what I just told you. He was ready to go. He signed the executive order 30 seconds when he was asked. And he moved very, very quickly and very effectively. And the head of our National Guard here, Major General Singh, has been incredibly impressive in the way that she's handled things and in the media. I don't think he has gotten, because the media has continued to, and some of this is scripted by the mayor of Baltimore, who's had multiple press conferences with local leaders and brought in people to kind of come to her defense, in the way she handled this, because it's always a political issue. I'd frankly like to see the governor be a little more assertive in pointing out how he was responsible for bringing this. In the fullness of time, I think we'll see some of that play out, but I don't think he's gotten enough credit.
Okay, let me look at my list real quick.
Harry Truman had a sign on his desk that said, "The buck stops here." He was the president, and there were no excuses for anything that happened below him.
No, and these days we see them all trying to weasel out of any responsibility for their own actions, never mind anybody else's.
That started with Clinton.
Yeah.
All right, Greg, Brian Griffiths wrote something at Red Maryland. And,
anything that's happened below waist level wasn't his problem.
He, thanks for the aside. He was pointing out some issues with the way the city was funding projects and loans and investment in the city, and how I'm kind of wandering off the reservation here. They weren't really directing resources to the places that needed it. Do you think this impacted the response? I mean, did it irritate them? Did it really fire up a riot? I mean, was that really necessary?
No. What really allowed things to get out of control was just the poor police response to what was anticipated and what was known. And then when they were engaged, they backed off and gave license essentially to the rioters to get out of control. What Brian's talking about and addressing is the arguments that are being made that this is coming out of some, social justice concern and, communities that are perpetually disadvantaged economically. And what Brian's pointing out there is just like the way the police handled the situation over the weekend, the city has been horribly mismanaged when it comes to the way that it handles economic development and economic resources. Look, you have to understand that the politics of Baltimore City, as I mentioned earlier on, it's not remotely competitive. I mean, this is an oligarchy that runs Baltimore City. It's a one-party, and it's not even competitive within the Democratic Party. It's an oligarchy that's funded by development donations and the ministers who have power within the city. And the fact is, the way that economic development is oriented is not only inefficient because it's centrally planned, it's inefficient because it isn't oriented towards economic development results. It's oriented politically. So the development that gets done is not primarily concerned with what would be in the best interest of developing Baltimore. It's who are we giving favors to because they're helping fund our campaigns. And this is compounded by one of the criticisms that Brian wrote in the Baltimore Sun a year ago, which got an immediate reaction from Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake, that the mayors of Baltimore for some time have been more concerned about politics outside of the city than they have been fixing the problems in the city themselves.
All right, Brian.
Mayor Rawlings Blake is, if you don't know, he is secretary of the National Democratic Party.
Oh, great.
She is routinely referred to as a rising star in Democratic politics.
We're going to have to cut you off because we're out of time, sir.
Okay.
But we will catch up offline and try to get some of that up on Granite Grok so that our readers and listeners will learn more about it. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you. Bye-bye. We will be right back.